Welcome back to our chats with some of our pub crawl guides. My name's Justin. We'll be doing a lot of these chats at Edinburgh Pub Crawl, where we chat to current guides, we chat to our previous guides, we get to know them, their sort of experiences of lockdown, and chat to them. So we're joined today by Alan. Alan, do you want to say hello, my friends?
Hello, everyone.
So what are you drinking today? I'm drinking on the red wine.
I've got this Estonian pale ale called from Pujala, if that means anything.
Well, cheers to you, my friends.
Chin.
There you go. So how are you enjoying your quarantine experience? I know you've got exams and stuff. How's that going for you?
Yeah, man. I haven't really got into the flow of it yet, but getting there. I got a month to go. But it's not so bad here. They didn't close down the bars, so they've got a curfew on. So I was out like at dinner last night, or we go out in the sun to this bar, and everyone's 2 meters apart, so like in chairs and like in a square. But you know, like after a whiskey or so, you know, you don't care as much.
Hugging each other, I guess.
That's about 2 meters.
So yeah, I mean, I think some of these social distancing practices in some of the bars is really how we're going to be looking at doing things. I was watching something from the States that we're talking about restaurants, and the idea popped up that your menu would be disposable, that you would use it once. Your waiter or waitress would have a mask on, you'd be wearing a mask, and all that kind of stuff. It is really quite interesting. I mean, do you want to tell us a little bit more about how the bars work? Is there capacities in the bar? Is there any of that?
I think the main thing here is that everyone just self-isolated straight away. So even though bars were open doesn't mean people went. Like everywhere was dead. Everywhere still is dead. It's just starting to warm up now. And so it was because we had like that big social reaction. I think one of the old presidents said, "Guys, we did this in World War II. We can rebuild the economy. We can't rebuild lives." And as a nation, Estonia has gone through so much shit, and like half of its population was routinely killed in the last couple of world wars. So they're just used to being like, right, shit's hit the fan. Let's just buckle down and get through this. But it's kind of good, and like I think you talked about like practices, but I think the thing I really appreciate is like washing hands or like soap dispensers at the beginning. On so many pub crawls, you go into the gents and you see like, barely anyone's washing their hands. And like now, you knew how many people weren't just being generally clean, or the soap dispenser was out of soap or whatever. So now I think that's a really good habit moving forward. I don't think it's going to go away. Just like clean your hands on entry to a place.
Well, I remember before the lockdown came in, a handful of the bars had brought in hand sanitizers on the front doors, so that as you came in, you could sanitize. As you left to go have a cigarette or leave the bar, you could sanitize again. And it didn't do a hell of a lot, obviously, in terms of keeping everybody safe. But it's a measure that does matter in the long run, I think.
Well, that's what the doctors, even every flu pandemic, everyone would just say, just wash your fucking hands. Like, it's not that hard, guys. We use them for everything. It's good to wash them in between changing of substances and mediums.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously we're here to talk about pub crawl stuff. Do you miss the pub crawls? The main question I want to ask you actually is what the difference is between pub crawls in Estonia and Edinburgh, because obviously a lot of people might not know that obviously you're based in Estonia right now, that you are sort of by country pub crawl guide. You've got a bit of experience doing this sort of both parts of the country.
Yeah, man. So look, my first paid job was in a hostel here in Estonia, and I did pub crawls there, and then did pub crawls in Central America while I was sorting out my life and drugs. And then I came back to Edinburgh to do my education, and Justin took me under his wing. And originally for ghost tours, he wouldn't trust me on pub crawls, so I had to go and spook people in a suit.
It's not that I didn't trust you, it's that you're fucking scary looking. And I thought it's funny, we're coming a couple of years since the ghost tour sort of was a thing, and I managed to fish out this.
Oh
Remember this?
man, that's awesome. We had a
Yeah.
guy who wanted to buy it and like tracked it down.
Well, believe it or not, you might be a little bit disappointed in me. The version that was so just to give a bit of background to the people watching, we had a tour called the Haunted Taverns tour, where it was a lot like, it was a mix between a pub crawl and a ghost tour, where we would take you some of the older pubs and we would tell you some of the ghost stories that were involved in those bars. And this book was a big part of the whole Haunted Taverns journey, and people were fascinated by it. I got very, very drunk after a pub crawl, had a house party, and I drunkenly gave it to some random person that showed up at my house. I thought they'd find it funny, and I just gave them the Haunted Taverns version. So I had to track this down on the internet, and what was previously quite a inexpensive book to track down became £65 for this tiny little book. So at least I have it again. But tell you what, I'll read the classic one before we move on. Remember Miss Alias from Lady Agnew of the Netherbow?
Yes.
And it's this drunken bundle of iniquity is about 50 years of age, lusty and tall. She's followed the old trade since she was about 13. One of the things she can boast of is she's the daughter of a late worthy baronet who was a brave general in the war before last. Being a disgrace to her family, who were some of the best in Scotland, she was sent to the north, where she continued her business for a long time. She regards neither decency nor decorum, and would willingly lie with a chimney sweep as with a lord. Her desires are so immoderate that she would think nothing of a company of grenadiers at one time. Take her all in all, she is an abandoned piece. And it's called Directory of Ladies of Pleasure in Edinburgh, and it's from 1775. So what a book, huh?
We even had a map, I think.
It did. I had a fold-out map, and it's got porn in it as well. I'll show you a picture of what a prostitute used to look like back then. Let me see. There she is. Look at that. That's saucy minx.
I had a guy on it who he was a descendant of Robert E. Lee, and like he basically emailed us after, and I think or emailed me or whatever, and wanted a copy of the book, so I gave him the name, and he ended up tracking it down in the States. He also sent me like a copy of his ancestral tree because I asked about it, and yeah, he was related to Robert E. Lee. Of course, I then asked him for a review, which I think he gave us, but then didn't want to talk to me much after that because he's like, "Oh, you don't like me."
The Haunted Taverns tour did bring some really interesting people.
I made more money on tips than I did on wage. Like I could walk home with 60 quid in tips after 3 hours. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was a very strange tour for that kind of stuff because I think it was more service driven than it was experience driven. You know, we were doing whiskey tastings, we were doing all kinds of stuff. It's a shame the tour's not still going. It's just the costs were too high to keep it running.
Yeah.
It's just a but I managed to do a Haunted Taverns tour with a Grammy winner. He was a noise boy, an engineer for a particular track. I'm not going to name drop or anything because I think that would be quite a bad thing to do, especially considering how much I embarrassed myself when I went to go visit them in LA. But well, that's a different story. But yeah,
I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. But there's a whole lot. It was very, very interesting, the kind of people that you meet. Yeah, very, very bizarre. So tell us about pub crawls and what do you miss about them?
So back to the original story for our viewers. So I worked with Justin on this pub crawl, and I hadn't got over Estonia ever since I left. So I went back and managed a pub crawl company up there. That fell apart. So I came back and worked with Justin for 2 years again, and I now still work. And I went back to Estonia, and now I work with Justin whenever I'm in the UK, which is before the lockdown was every couple of weeks because it's like 2.5 hours on the plane. Go see my granny. and have a couple of drinks. All good.
Wee
Main
cup of tea?
difference. A wee cup of tea. She likes a whiskey soda.
Nice one. Yeah, my gran wasn't alcoholic, so I guess we're different in upbringing. So that's interesting enough. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm quarantine's such a weird thing. I mean, I'm as much as I'm enjoying getting the time to kind of do all the things that I wanted to do. By having a lot of time off and, sitting on my arse watching Netflix is, for the most part, kind of fun. There is another side to this whole thing where it's, a little bit claustrophobic and a little bit, cabin fevery. Are you doing anything to sort of alleviate your cabin fever? Are you getting out of the house?
I fucking just have to go for a walk every day. I get like nerve compression, or like if you're basically sitting in a chair too long and you get chest pains. So like at one point I thought I was having a heart attack, and like I got a doctor's appointment and they're like, when was the last time you went outside? How many times a week? Just go for a fucking walk. And I was like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing a lot more walking as well. As you say about the hand washing thing, and that's a good habit that might stick after all this thing ends. I have been doing a lot more walking than I used to do, and I think it's kind of enjoyable. I certainly found a joy for it that I didn't have before, and the water of Leith is surprisingly beautiful. And for someone that likes all the history, there's a lot of history surprisingly on my doorstep. Toric House is a stone's throw away from my house, and I think it said 1678 on the little notice board that was.
And you've got what's remains of the citadel not too far from you as well.
Yeah.
Well, it used to be a fucking castle, like in Leith, and they just took it down.
Yeah, the French helped build it because they didn't like the English, and neither did
I thought Cromwell put it out. Oh, I don't know. So there's like, go for it.
Taken down, but there is. Well, yeah, we're never getting into boring history. That I think. Do you have any crazy pub crawls that you'd like to share?
Crazy pub crawls. I think Edinburgh has them more crazier as a group. In Estonia, I have more crazy as individuals. So in Edinburgh, like the hardest thing I've ever done is walk somewhere home because they're too drunk, and I'm like, look, it's late. Especially like single women, you don't know where you're going, you're a bit too drunk. Let's make sure you get to your hostel, wherever you're staying, be safe. Because the last thing you want is anything like that happening. That's we've always talked about. You've already taught us. In Estonia, though, it's a bit more Wild Westy because the people who come out here are a bit crazy. So I had one night where I had this like ex-Danish army captain come out on the pub crawl, and he just said to us straight up, like, I was just going to sit in my apartment, drink a bottle of vodka and order some hookers, like, so I thought I'd just come out with you. And he was married, so he's just doing this while he's away. So true pub crawl fashion, I'm like, cool man, well, it's 10 euros if you want to get on. So it's this tiny group, like 5 people. So it's me, this other guy, my Danish friend who was visiting at the time, and 2 Korean girls. So we're actually having a decent time, having chats. You play games. You play games with a lot of people because that makes conversation, makes narrative, so people don't get bored. And we're doing all right. And then one of the Asian girls went off to like go to the toilet, and she didn't come back for a while. So I'm like, something's gone wrong here. And we realized like there's one of the toilets is locked and no one's answering. So I think one of the guides I'm with is Russian, and she's really pretty. She just goes and bats her eyelids at the bouncer, and the bouncer comes down and pulls out this big, like, I want to say 7-inch blade, and just like undoes the toilet. We look in, the Korean girl's there, fully clothed, but literally there's a pile of sick next to her head. So she's ultimately gone in, thrown up like a good like couple of kilos of sick, and just passed out next to it. so what do you do? Like, well, you go in there, you make sure she's breathing, you make sure like everything's all right, do your basic first aid, and then well, you got to get her home, get her safe. So her friend was still conscious, so I had to pick her up over my shoulder and walk her. But none of the cabs would take her because they just her friend was saying, "Oh, we want to go here," and they just look at us two like foreign like Asian girls that one's covered in sick. Like I've got sick on me because I just had to pick this one up. So, nah. So that night ended. Is I was working and living at a hostel. I took them back to the hostel. I said, "Look, I'm not going to force you, but I think you should check in here. Here's the price." I got them like I made sure they were put in a room by themselves. I made sure she had water, and I said, "Look, I'm not going to stay in this room because a single guy in with two girls. That's just a no-no because they could say anything, and you're just like, yeah, you never go in alone with someone. You always have a witness." It sounds so like it's just being professional as a pub crawl guide. But anyway, that night ended up. We went downstairs. My Danish friend had brought some schnapps. He said, "Oh, this is traditional Danish schnapps. I've had it since I was 16." The Danish captain's there. We just shoot back schnapps, playing Street Fighter. And then just before we went to go out to a club again, and I look at the schnapps and just like, Lesson, who's the Danish guy, is like, you know this is Norwegish? He's like, what? This is just, I've drunk this as a tradition since I was 16. Yeah, on the bottle it says it's from Norway. Fuck!
Oh, that's great.
So then we go to a club and this Danish captain sees pretty blonde girls and just goes off and we're like, yeah, cool. And then I wake up in the morning and like the girl just like, hey, thank you for saving me. And I'm just sitting in my boxers and a t-shirt like, cool, I'm gonna go have a pizza now.
All in the day's work of a pub crawl guide. Yeah. Yeah.
Give us a review.
Are some of the best. One of my favorites, and again, it's such a bizarre story. There was a dude, there was a couple that had sort of disappeared for a while. They didn't know each other before the pub crawl happened, but we could see them sort of gradually as bars went on, that they just got closer and closer and closer to each other. And then suddenly they disappeared. So it didn't take a genius to work out what was going on. And by the time we sort of realized that they'd been away for a while, it's when they were starting to come back. And the dude came out of, I was going down to the bathroom, there was like a staircase, and as he was coming up the staircase as I was going down, and he went, "Oh, buddy," and he patted me on the back, and he said, "I wish I had a condom, I just ruined that girl's dress," and walked on. And it kind of shocked me because I'd never heard anyone talk like that about the whole experience, and I was so bizarre about the whole thing. But the next thing that happened was even more weird. Someone was walking around the bar with a cum stain on them. And that's what fascinated me more than anything else. I was scoping around the bar, looking for this person with a cum stain. And sure enough, I see this girl come out and she's scratching her dress. Apparently what she had done is she'd stuck it under the hand dryer and let it dry, and then decided to start scratching off the cum off her dress.
That's not a bad idea, actually.
It's a terrible idea. I have been
getting covered in cum in a public place is also a bad idea.
Hey, that's not how you get it out. You need to get it there while it's wet. It's like wine. Semen is like wine. You need to get
I don't have your experience in getting cum out of clothes.
Well, when it comes to cum and wine, I'm kind of an expert, my friend.
Does it get better with? Does it taste better with time, Justin? With age?
Yes, its cum shot is quite a remarkable thing. It really does. You want to get it in an oak barrel as well. Yeah.
Come on the pub crawl, guys. We've got lots of aged drinks,
Yeah, time is a great healer. But yeah, while we're there, I just want to say thanks for stopping by, for everyone watching. We'll be doing more of these videos very soon. There's tons of them already up on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can even find us on YouTube as well. We have vouchers available on the internet that you can come and find. If you go to edinburghpubcrawl.com, you'll find those vouchers. They're valid for 6 months from the date that you book them, and all you have to do is let us know when you're coming, and it's easy peasy to go to. So thanks, Alan. Do you have anything to say before you go?
If you're coming, just make sure to get it off while it's wet. I had to have another one. I had to have another stab.
Well, on that note, thanks for stopping by, and goodbye to everyone
Take it easy, man.
And thanks very much.